Hello students, welcome to AriserTalent. As you know, we are studying very important chapter of NCERT, that is life process. In life process, I am teaching you about the transportation in human beings. So let's start. Here already I have discussed I have already tell you about the structure of heart. Now in this lecture we are going to talk about the functioning or working of this heart. So students, as I already told you that human heart is 4-chambered. Okay, first of all let me mention the topic which we are studying. We are studying the topic is heart, and in which we are going to talk about the functioning or working of heart. So already I told you that heart is 4-chambered. So here we can mention human heart is 4-chambered. Human heart is 4-chambered, and these chambered are what? 4-chambered. These are right atrium, okay, right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle. Okay, so these are the main 4 chambers of human heart. In my previous lecture, I told you generally human heart is muscular and hollow, and it is divided into 2 parts, 2 halves by a septa. Then each half has 2 chambers. Thus we can say that complete heart has 4 chambers. These are right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium and left ventricle. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the functioning of this heart. Come to the point students. Here we can see the structure of heart. So here, as I told you in my previous lecture, that superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, which opens in the right atrium, okay, they carry the deoxygenated blood from the body. Superior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body. Then we can say that the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the body to the right atrium. Here we can say that these superior vena cava and inferior vena cava are attached here to the right atrium. So these both are bringing deoxygenated blood from the body parts to the right atrium. Clear? Now we can see right atrium and right ventricle are separated by a septa, but here you can see a wall. This valve is known as tricuspid wall. Clear? Now what is the function of this tricuspid wall? This tricuspid wall allows the movement or flow of blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle. Okay, so thus we can say that this tricuspid wall allow the flow of deoxygenated blood from the right atrium to the left ventricle. Okay, so this tricuspid wall allow the flow of blood only in the one direction. You can see the arrow here. So this arrow is the sign that the flow of blood is only in the one direction. Clear? So the function of this tricuspid valve is that it allows the flow of blood only in the one direction. Means the deoxygenated blood from the right atrium reaches to the right ventricle through this tricuspid valve. In my previous lecture, when I told you the structure of heart, that time I told you that pulmonary valve, this pulmonary tract arises from the right ventricle only. Then further it divides into the right pulmonary artery and left pulmonary artery. Okay, so here we can see there is a valve. Okay, so the blood here, deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle moves to the pulmonary artery through this pulmonary valve. Okay, now from this pulmonary artery, blood goes to the lung. Blood goes to the lungs. Okay, now here in the lungs, the blood which reaches here in the lungs is deoxygenated, but when the deoxygenated blood reaches here in the lungs, it picks up oxygen. Okay. Then from here it comes to the left atrium through this pulmonary veins. Okay. Then from this left atrium through the pulmonary veins, oxygenated blood enters into the left atrium. Okay. Now from the left atrium through this valve, oxygenated blood enters into the left ventricle. Okay, so now it is clear that the right part of the heart carries the deoxygenated blood, but the left part of the heart carries oxygenated blood. Okay, now from this left ventricle, blood goes to the different parts of the body through the aorta. Okay, so this is the complete functioning of the heart. Now I am going to explain you the notes, or I am going to give you the notes. As I told you, human heart has 4 chambers. Okay, so we know that our human heart pump the blood. So let me mention human heart pumps the blood. Okay, so here we know that deoxygenated blood reaches to the right atrium through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So let me mention superior, or let me mention blood reaches to the, if we talk about the working, then we can mention deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood reaches to the right atrium through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Okay. So here we can say that deoxygenated blood from the body reaches to the right atrium through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So come to the diagram once again. I told you that superior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava brings the, or carries the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body to the right atrium, because here we can see that the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava both opens in the right atrium. So these green arrow shows the flow of the blood into the right atrium. Okay, so here deoxygenated blood reaches to the right atrium through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Now we can mention that deoxygenated blood flows to the right ventricle through the tricuspid wall. This deoxygenated blood flows from right atrium to the right ventricle through tricuspid wall. Okay. This tricuspid wall allows the flow of blood, deoxygenated flow of blood. Which blood is flowing from right artery to right ventricle? This is deoxygenated blood. Fine. So this deoxygenated blood flows from the right atrium to the right ventricle through this tricuspid wall. Here we can see this tricuspid wall. Okay. So we can mention now that this wall allows the flow of blood only in the one direction. It does not allow the blood to flow back. Okay, come to the next point. Tricuspid wall allows the flow of blood only in the one direction, only in the one direction, and does not allow the blood to flow back. Clear? Let me explain you again that here we can see the valve is opening in the downwards direction. Okay, so here this valve allows the flow of blood only in the one direction, means from right atrium to the right ventricle. This valve does not allow the flow of blood in the backward direction. Okay, next is, we all know that pulmonary arteries arises from the right ventricle only. So here blood goes, now blood, which blood? This deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood flows to pulmonary artery, flows from the right ventricle to pulmonary artery, flows from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. Okay, so make a point that pulmonary artery arises from the right ventricle only. So thus deoxygenated blood flows from right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. Now this blood goes from pulmonary artery to the lungs. Let me mention, deoxygenated blood flows from pulmonary artery to the lungs, from pulmonary artery to the lungs. Artery to the lungs. Okay, so here when the deoxygenated blood reaches in the lungs, and we all know that oxygen is present in the lungs only. So here this blood picks up the oxygen and then flows from lungs to the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. Okay, now let me mention, blood picks up oxygen from the lungs and flows to left atrium. Okay, flows to left atrium through these pulmonary veins, through pulmonary veins. Okay, now this oxygenated blood from left atrium reaches to the left ventricle through this aortic valve. Okay, let me mention, oxygenated blood. Now which kind of blood is present in the left atrium? Oxygenated blood. Let me mention, oxygenated blood flows from left atrium to the left ventricle through this aortic valve, through the valve. Okay, fine. Now from left ventricle the oxygenated blood flows to the different parts of the body through the aorta. Okay, this oxygenated blood reaches to or flows to aorta and reaches to from here flows to the different parts of the body and then flows to different parts of the body. Okay, so this is the complete mechanism of working of heart, or we can say this is the process of working of heart. So let me explain you what is the actual working of the heart. Let me summarize you that deoxygenated blood, here let me mention, deoxygenated blood reaches to the right atrium. It reaches to the right atrium through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So let me mention superior vena cava, and inferior vena cava. Okay, so what kind of blood reaches into the right atrium? This is deoxygenated blood. Let me mention deoxygenated blood. Okay, deoxygenated blood means the blood which does not have oxygen. So deoxygenated blood reaches from upper part of the body and lower part of the body, means we can say that deoxygenated blood reaches to the right atrium from the different parts of the body through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Now from the right atrium it reaches to the right ventricle. Let me mention, from right atrium it reaches to the right ventricle. Okay, so here it reaches, means deoxygenated blood reaches from right atrium to the right ventricle through the tricuspid wall. Here let me mention, through the tricuspid wall. Okay, from right ventricle it reaches to the pulmonary artery. Okay, it reaches to the pulmonary artery. Okay, and from pulmonary artery it goes to the lungs. It reaches to the lungs. Okay, so here blood picks up the oxygen. Now the oxygenated blood, okay, let me mention, picks up the oxygen. Now this oxygenated blood moves from the lungs to the left atrium. It reaches to the left atrium And what help us to reaches in the left atrium? Pulmonary veins. Let me mention pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins. Okay, so here the point is to be noted that pulmonary artery carries the deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle. Here you can see that this pulmonary artery carries the deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs, and oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried by the pulmonary veins. So you have to make point here, you have to understand and learn it nicely that deoxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary artery and oxygenated blood is carried from the lungs through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. Okay, so here from the lungs oxygenated blood reaches to the left atrium by the pulmonary veins. Then from left atrium it moves towards the left atrium, left ventricle, left ventricle, okay, through the valve, because valve allow the flow of blood only in the one direction. Now from the left ventricle blood moves to the aorta, and from this aorta blood goes to the rest part of the body, rest part, or we can say all parts of the body. Okay, so here we can say in the human the heart is 4-chambered, and this 4-chambered heart performs the function of pumping the blood into the parts of body. So here we can pay attention that the right part of the heart carries the deoxygenated blood, but the left part of the heart carries the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the different parts of the body. Okay, so here we can see that human heart is in the human heart blood is circulating twice. Once it is going from once the deoxygenated blood is reaching to the right part of the heart, and from here right part of the heart it reaches to the lung. This is the first circulation. Okay, and from the lungs oxygenated blood moves or circulate into the right part of the heart, and then it goes to the different parts of the body. So we can say in the humans the blood circulation is double, means we can say we can find a double circulation of blood in the humans. So such kind of circulation means once the deoxygenated blood flows from the one part of the heart to the lungs, and then oxygenated blood flows from lungs to the other part of the heart. So we can say that in the humans double circulation of blood is found. Okay, so this is the complete mechanism or complete working of the heart. Hope everything is clear to you. Thank you.